But the so when you see this, this is like one technique, and it actually works really well inside a substance. Now, if you're doing mudbox, um, because they work a little bit differently, what what I would do is I might actually make it inside of Maya. So you guys are, let me open up 2018, always having tons and tons of Maya's open. So let's see. So if I make, let me just show you. Let me make a poly plane, just so you can kind of see how this works. And I'll just do this one. I'll lift it up a little bit so we don't see the grid. And first I want to add the appropriate divisions.
When you're making hair cards, is it just a plane or do you want it to be like a flat cube?
You want a plane. You don't want a cube because then it's going to do weird things with well, for one, it'll be adding a whole lot more geometry than you want. I mean,
Okay.
unless you're doing something like the molded hair, like Jimmy Neutron kind of deal, if you
Oh
remember what
yeah.
it looks like. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if I'm doing something that is very kind of a solid molded look, like this, then it would just be a shape. I would literally just sculpt that and then put a hair texture on it.
Okay.
What was here we have like a mixture. Okay. Now they're actually using a hair simulation, but you could get the same effect with a mixture of things. So like his, it would be for the volume, you might have a larger piece in here of hair, and then you have cards coming out, intersecting, and um, kind of cross hatching, showing this. This would be a few cards that are actually going backward, and then maybe a shape inside that's hair, and then you just have the wisp of hair that's on top of it, like a few layers of that. Now, I'll show you what I mean in a second, where Maya has a few issues with showing transparencies, you might have noticed. When you actually add a transparency in Maya, it has this annoying habit of not overlaying multiple transparencies on top of each other, and it gets very confused of what draws in front of the other. So let me show you what I mean, though. First, let me make a quick hair texture using Photoshop, just so you can see. Let's see.
On mine, I tried to do it really fast, and so I used like the fiber render, and then I like used wind to like blend it down.
Oh, nice. Well, you can.
Like, yay!
It's like all the fun stuff. Hold on. Let's see. Here we go. I was making this one. Excuse me. So, do you want me to walk through just making this part here, or it'll only take a minute if you want? Um,
Sure.
so if I go, let's say new.
Please.
Sure. And let's do, we could do a 1K or a 2K texture. Um, let's do a 2K. I haven't done a 2K hair. Why not? It's a bit much, but hey, for everything there's a first. So I'm gonna fill this with white. I'm going to add a noise, Gaussian monochromatic. I'm going to crank that puppy up a bit. Okay. And now I'm going to do a filter. And I'm going to do a motion blur. That is going to be vertical. So it's going 90 degrees up. Now, this is kind of neat because this is sort of like how coarse I can make the hair or how straight, that kind of deal. I don't want to go all the way. I want there to be a little bit of wave to it and a little bit of changes in it. But I'm going to do it at about 96 pixels. And the next thing I want to do is I want to pop that out. So I'm going to adjust my levels. And actually, before I do that, let me duplicate this because things can go wrong and you always want to have a backup. So I want to add more contrast to this. Kind of pull that. Okay, something like that maybe. And the idea is that I have some depth to it, right? So let me duplicate that one more time. And let's just see if we did do another motion blur. I kind of like that. That looks nice. A little silkier. That'll work. So, a few things. One, I could add a brand new layer and then choose a color that I would want the base color of the hair to be. And the base color depends on how you're going to actually render the hair. Like if I'm going to use subsurface scattering on it and it's brown, then I want a lighter color to be in the subsurface scattering color. Also, I want to think about, like a brownish hair will have highlights to it potentially, from the sun and shininess, so it'll almost look golden or blonde in some areas, depending on how dark and silky the hair is. So if I take, let's say we'll take this color and I'm going to fill and then change the blending modes. And as I change the blending modes, we could see different effects to that. See that? So once again, we're getting more into an aesthetic of what we want the hair to look like. This is kind of neat where it has these highlights. And if I use this or a varied version of this for my specular, that would actually be pretty nice, right? If I want something to be a little bit more, straightforward like this, but I'm kind of digging this one a lot. And so as you go through these blending modes, depending on the color and what look you're going for and how you're going to apply it in the material, you might choose something different. The cool part is that because this is on a layer all by itself right now, I can just hit Control U to change the hue of it. If it's too red or too, maybe the character has blue hair or whatever the case, then I can just go in on this layer, hit Control U, and then just change, the saturation and the color of it to get a certain look that I might want. Okay. And okay, kind of like this one. So I'm going to do a select all, edit, copy merged, paste. So I have a flattened version of it. And I can always go into my levels and kind of vary it from there to get, whatever look it is I'm going for. But this is only half of it. The other half is making an actual alpha channel for this. So if I go to my channels, well, first I'm going to turn this layer off, turn that layer off. I'm going to select this one, copy it, add a brand new alpha channel, select only the alpha, and then paste that in. So what I'm imagining is something. What I'm imagining is that maybe the top of this is going to be where the follicles, the hair is coming out of follicles out of the head. And then the tip of this is literally the tip of the hair itself. And I want to have these variances here and here, more so down here, depending on, once again, the style. Because if I don't have variances and it's not showing like, what would be individual hairs coming out, you get this really annoying card sticking out of someone's head effect that has this sharp line and you can see where it actually is. So if I can break that up a little bit in the alpha, remember white shows and black hides, then it will look, and when you get closer to the character, it'll blend more with the other layers and you'll be able to see the actual strands of hair coming out of the forehead. So let's try something. Let's do levels in here. This will give me a little bit of depth inside of here. And now on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my burn tool. I can deselect everything now. Let's crank you up a bit. So these are the tips. I'm going to go now to my midtones. Let's go to the highlights. Tighten this brush up a bit. Do you see that? So that I can get it. So this is going to be the edge of my hair at the bottom where we could see some of these strands. And I'm just kind of going over it right now with a burn tool along the bottom.
On the specular map, would you use like a similar, I guess like a similar looking alpha, so it's not specular where where there's no hair?
I would, yes. And I would actually break it up. I would have a higher contrast to the specular version. We can make that too. So that basically what would happen is I don't want it to be super shiny all over. I want to see more individual strands of shininess. So we go. So check this out. Now if I go into shadows, it's just going to intensify. Oops, a little bit too much. So I could even have just, you see that? Just to even the edges off a little, or not make them not so perfectly cut depending on what they are. And even lowering this down a little bit, I can have it kind of come up in certain areas a little bit more. You see that?
This looks way more organic
How are
than
you
what I
going to
made.
do that?
Huh? And then up here,
You ask your question, Sarah.
oh, what's the question?
We were
I was
both
just,
talking over each other.
Oh, gotcha.
I was just saying it looks really organic and it looks good.
Well, and it's cool because what happens is when you do it this way, I just want to get these little edges here because I want to see those little follicles or the little hair strands coming into the head. See? So, okay. So I'm digging that. That looks okay. So I've got my alpha. I might even, if I wanted to be a little bit thicker here, I might go over it with a dodge and just kind of brighten some of these areas if I wanted to. But it's really up to you. And you may have to do, like I said, a little bit of trial and error. Okay. The only other thing I might do, let me go back and turn the RGB back on, turn off the alpha. Is I might also make a specular version of that. So in other words, if I went back to that alpha, like this one, because I don't want shiny where there's not supposed to be a card there. Otherwise, you get this little glossy halo effect. So if I take all this, copy it, excuse me, let's see. So now I'm going to paste this in. And actually, I could even do this. I could make this my specular color if I wanted to, right? So here's the color. Here's the specular. And what's up?
If your specular color is black, will it not have a highlight?
Depending on where you put it, yeah, it wouldn't be shiny.
Okay.
So then I would save these out as separate files. And then once I have it on the card, then I could see how do I like it. So if I go File, Save As, and let's go to my source images, save you out as a targa. We'll call this hair spec. .32 bits because we're using an alpha channel. Turn that off. Just to be safe, I'm also going to save, even though I've included the alpha, I'm just going to save this out as an alpha, just in case, not Mudbox, Arnold is giving me grief. So I'm going to save this out as an alpha, just in case, for whatever reason, the alpha is not doing what it's supposed to do. So save you out as a targa, call this one hair alpha. 24 bits because we don't really need that, the alpha in this one because it's redundant. And this one, file, save as, targa, hair, color, or diffuse, whichever, you know. Okay. And okay, we'll just put that one in there. So Okay. So if I actually make sure this guy is UV mapped first. And I want to identify where's my top. Okay, I'm going to say that's the top, which means I want these guys to be, oops, did I just lose you? Nope, you're right. Put you like right there. Just tighten it up just a wee bit. Looks good. Okay. Assign new material. AI standard surface. And what I'm going to do is I'll go in now the base color. Let me just try. Notice sometimes using an Arnold image tends to be a little bit more, oh weird. Why are you not going to the project? Strange. File, save scene as hair. There we go. Oh, don't tell me I got it in the wrong one. Let me see. Sorry about that. File, save as. Always happens when you, oh, it's in the 3D. Okay, that's why. 3D copy. Oh, you're just going to be a pain. Fine. This is what happens when you have like stuff that's saved all over the place. Fine, we'll just do it this way, and I won't tell. Just in the interest of time. Okay, hair color. There it is. Let's do the hair color for the specular. Okay. I could also do a bump for this as well, but let's see here. Cute. Just wanted to see what would actually. Yeah, okay. Might need a texture in there. That's fine. So let's do something. Let's grab you. Gonna pull that up. use the soft select without hitting the Windows button. It's always fun. So you see how I can actually start to shape this?
Mm-hmm. Now, for making multiples of that, would you just like have a master plane that you just keep copying, or do you kind of copy them and keep adjusting them from your last one?
Let me show you what I do usually. So if I have this, oh, that's right. What I would do is I would hold down D, V, snap the pivot point to up here.
Okay.
So then when I duplicate it, I could just start to do this.
Much simpler than what I was thinking.
Huh?
Usually how it works.
Yeah, you want to try and keep things as simple as possible because, yeah, trust me, there's a lot of times that things are going to be harder than what they should be. So I relish in the fact of when
Oh,
something is a
I do
lot
that with
easier.
everything. It's usually after the fact that I get it done. I find out that I could have just pressed one button and it would have made my life easier. And I have a lot of
That's
facepalm
me
moments,
too.
needless to say.
It happens. So do you see what I mean
Like,
now? How I could start to get this and then I would just start to shape it. Now, here's the deal though. I'm curious to see. Oh, of course. Okay. Oh, silly me. I forgot to do something. Every time you have a model that you are using a transparency on Arnold, you have to designate that it actually has a transparency on it. Okay, so now if we go back in here, we start tweaking things out. So that's specularity. Cut down the weight of the base. Was there? I didn't think there was. I was like, I wonder if there was a preset for hair, but no. Just got to go solo. Okay, let's see what happens just for giggles if we put the hair color file into there. There we go.
I have a question about subsurface.
Sure, that's better.
Um, like it seems on mine, whenever I add subsurface, it takes over the base color, and like if I have a solid color, it doesn't work the way I want it to.
In subsurface, you have to actually either give it a color, because you have to imagine that the color or whatever texture you put into it is going to be what you see when light shows through it.
Okay. Because, like, I have freckles on my girl, and when I added a subsurface, like, say I did peach or something, it would, like, erase, like, the marks I had on the painting for the base color. And so I wound up just using the file for the subsurface.
Yeah.
Is that, like, normal?
Yeah, usually you have a modified version of the file for the subsurface, right? So
Okay.
potentially something with a little more contrast to it. I'm just using what I had in there already. But anything that I actually were to put in, this is the same one for the specular. You can kind of see that. So you see it's a little brighter. Now granted, if I take this light and so we see something a little bit better on there. There we go. So if I look at this and I'm like, wow, you know what? I want there to be more contrast to it, then I have to go back into my Photoshop files and add more contrast. So for example, let's say I take this file here, right? I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm just going to do this to it where I'm going to let's do a motion blur. Crank that up higher, like that. File, save as, let's call this one hair 2. Let's include that. And I'm going to go into sky and let's swap out a few textures. And now let's see what would happen. Go into here. And so transmission. Let's make you this might be too much, but let's just see. Do you see how the hairs are here? So watch this. If I go back into that Photoshop file, let's go back to the alpha. And let's do this. Remember, this guy was supposed to be our alpha. Let's do this. I'm going to go in. I'm going to do a motion blur. Like so. I'm going to adjust. Oh, let's see what that looks like. And then just so you can see it, if I, oh, that's the other thing. Sometimes I'll do this where I'll actually go in and start to do a little bit of messing around here. Let's increase this. So I'm just adding some high contrast to the transparency itself. File save as. Actually, we'll just do this. Copy. Paste. Targa. Save this as hair too. Yes, replace. Then I just a quick way to reload that. There we go. So the weird thing is, let me show you this, which is kind of odd. If I go into here, and Arnold definitely, affects how the hair is looking. Generate text size. Let's. Yeah, we want sRGB. if I were to create, just so you can kind of see, it's a little bit easier, but let me create, duplicate these guys. And I'm going to assign a new material to them of like an anisotropic. And in that anisotropic, I'm going to bring in that texture. Let's see. Cancel you. Go back here. So do you see what it's doing here? It's kind of weird how it's showing that, depending on the material. It's showing the transparency, but it's doing all sorts of weird things with it. And it's very hard to see what's on top of what, right? And a good portion of that is simply because of the fact that, number one, let's just pull that same file in. Let's just use you. That's better. You see that? It's still giving me a little grief, but at least in the render view, I could do this. Go to Viewport 2.0, and in its render settings, at least just inside of here, instead of object sorting, you say depth peeling. And what you'll notice, do you see how it looked? Let me switch it back. How it's getting very confused of what's drawing on what, but when I turn this on, we could actually see it rendering much better, at least in here.
How do you get to those settings?
Oh, just to see it in here?
Yeah.
Render Viewport 2.0. So this is particularly good, like if you're going to render with a hardware render, and this is also how it would look actually if you're going to render in Mudbox, right? So if I actually took this and you go to the options, oh, hey, Charity, and I go right in here under performance and transparency algorithm, switch it to from object sorting to depth peeling, and it fixes that. And then that helps out a lot. But if you're going to do it in Mudbox, here's the awesome thing. All you got to do, if you bring your character's head in here, place them as you want, and then just send it back out, just the hair alone, into Mudbox. And then you can do your renders inside of Mudbox. So it's kind of neat because if I actually, then I could actually position it a lot better anyway. See? But then I could actually modify it like, oh, I want her hair to turn this way. I want this to bend inward. That kind of stuff. So if I actually took these, I'd export them out as an FBX, and then I could actually import them into Mudbox, and then just start attaching them to my character and scaling them. But it would be a good idea, like let's just say I take these right here, and I'm just gonna move it here for right now. I'm just gonna say export selection, Materials and lighting. Oh, that's fine. Here. Let's try. Yeah, let's try this one. Let's see. Okay. Oops, you know what? That was silly. Let me open her up in Mudbox. So if I were actually in here, I could import it in, right? Just like the little eyelashes and stuff. So here's my character and different variations of materials like a toon shader and stuff. And if I actually import in the hair, oops, and there it is, very tiny. Hopefully she has a little more hair than that. Yeah, to world. And modify freeze transformations. That'll work. So now I could, oh, that's very punk, isn't it? I can actually go and then start to lay this out on her. Now, you'll notice, unless I have painted some hair underneath and stuff, what's going to happen is you might just have a lot of, actually, I'll just do this. Let me grab all these. Dupe that, bring it over, combine them. Huh, it's kind of interesting. Unless I have a whole lot of cards. You're going to see a lot of the scalp, and that's where a lot of times they'll have extras on, like underneath, underlining the hair. Because otherwise you have this effect that it's like, I can't really, I can see too much of her scalp underneath. So you have to have a fair amount. You can't really, unfortunately, be stingy with it. And then you see what I mean, where then you start to have it actually doing a lot more.
When you're placing the hair cards, do you have to be careful about them overlapping, or does it matter?
Not that much. I mean, you're trying, excuse me, you're going to have some overlap, just because of their nature, but they're so thin, you're not really going to notice because hair does weave with itself. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and I'm doing like a very quick, rough and dirty job just to illustrate it, but I would spend more time placing it. But, and then just the main ones, I would get more molded.
Okay.
But it's really going to depend on what you're trying to achieve with it, what the style is, and then just using things like, I would get the main spots, like smaller shots, and then I would have just wisp of hair that I would affect for like the main hairstyle. So then I would go in and say, oh, you know what, this one here, I'm going to move it so that I can fine tune exactly how this one is going to be. And then the next one, and then the next one. And then I'd go in and say, oh, you know what, if I grab these vertices here, and then the ones in the front are the ones I worry about the most, like these guys. On this one, I'd want to, kind of really vary it of how I want that positioned with itself. And then I'd go on to the next one. And then if I have these, oops, maybe all of these guys, oops, not you, are actually, Jinky, stop that, scaled and then pushed out, depending on what the look is that she's supposed to have. And then I would start to go in on what her style is supposed to be. Ideally, you're looking, I'm just kind of, putting it here, but ideally you would have an image that you're going with. And so that if like these guys here, like maybe it's supposed to kind of bend, so let me turn that off. See that? So then I could start to, oh yeah, this has to go out more. And then this has to go to the left because I want all of her hair to kind of go this way. You see how that works? But ideally, like I said, if you have an image of a hairstyle you're trying to do, and then you just kind of place the cards based off of that, it'll be a lot easier.
So if you were going for like a ponytail look, would you still just do that on cards, or would you have to do another type shape to do that cylinder-ish type look?
Depends. If I were, let's take something like this. Stupid. Why is I think my keyboard is acting weird. Okay, there we are. Yeah, I think, what the deuce? It is acting weird. Let's try that again. Okay, let's just grab vertices, fine. See, every time I hit the Alt key, it's like, oh, you're trying to hit the Alt key? Is that what you're doing? Okay, that's better. So, yeah, it should work. Let's increase this. And tighten that up like this. Rotate it a little bit like that. So you see where I'm going with this? For the ponytail.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I had this and I wanted to turn this into a ponytail, then what these guys would be is these guys would actually be well, actually I could do it with this one just so you could see. Let me duplicate this, pull it over here. And I'd want to have the hair basically kind of going flatter though, but let's do this like so. And then we need to modify freeze transformations and scale that onto itself like that.
It almost looks like Sideshow Bob.
Huh?
It almost looks like Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons.
I know, it's like it's popping out there. There we go. So if I get that now. And because, like, imagine her hair being pulled back, right? So if I had this, and I would have, do you see how that's starting to go back? And I would continue that to where
Yep.
her hair is pulled back, and then have like a little something here, like, you know, a scrunch or something like that, to hide where they're connecting. And then I would have the ponytail
Okay.
on the back of that as they meet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And then just kind of do what you did with the hair that you laid on the backside head, is just kind of roll it up slightly
Yes.
and kind of make like a little dangly bit.
That's pretty much it. I mean, you're getting a lot of it where, excuse me, you just have to lay it out to where you imagine it. I might have some smaller cards here, but do you see how I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
oops, a little too much there. Just lift that up. And you literally, you see that where it's starting to, oops, minus this blob of hair just hovering there kind of creepily. You know, so if I got rid of these guys, and then I just continued this on, do you see how that's starting to come together? And then I would just start taking these guys and start to pull them into where it's supposed to meet here. So there's a point where I would start to like line some of these up a little bit more. But does that make sense as far as like the
Yes.
general idea of it? And I'm not
Definitely
layering
a
too much,
lot
but
further ahead than what I was earlier.
awesome. And you see, and I'm rushing it. I'm not really trying to be like, oh, I'm perfecting it, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
see how
You're getting the
it,
point across, though.
yeah, it doesn't take that long, especially if you start to, um, yeah, if you do take your time a little bit with lining these up so that remember those edges we did, so that you would actually see that how the hairs look like they're coming out more rather than it just being a
Hmm.
hard edge card. And I would just layer these a little bit. See?
Yeah, it's definitely good to know to layer them because I would have not done that to have them intersecting in places.
And like I said, if you have um, a reference that you're using, it'll make life a lot easier. Um, just trying to get them lined up the way you want. Dupe that. Maybe shrink that down a bit. And you could just start to see this how we start to get the thickness in there. But that's essentially how I would handle the pony. I would make it longer and kind of make it not so popped out, but you get the idea. It's basically about that's a little better. And then I would just kind of fluff it out here and pinch it where it's supposed to meet and have a little model that would be my scrunchie or whatever. So I would spend more time and maybe not have the cards quite, not all the cards quite as big and all the same, but you get the general. And the cool idea is that you noticed when I UV laid this out, I put them all on one side, because I could have other cards and other transparencies for shorter cards and stuff to the side of the texture for this one. I could even include things like eyebrow cards, and stuff like that. Let's see.
That's really good. If you're going to paint the scalp, would you paint it first, or would you leave the hair out and kind of add color in areas it's needed?
Um, that's a good that's a good question, and realistically, it kind of depends. Um, Again, on what my usage is, right? So, if I know that the character is never going to change their hair, in other words, a big thing like let's say you're going to video games, which it looks like I'm gonna have a few of you guys in the uh, in my next class. Um, but if you're doing it for a video game, and I have to take into consideration whether or not the character is customizable. Okay, so a lot of the games now, the big thing is customizing your character, changing their hair, changing their outfit, changing their armor, and depending on what their usage is, I kind of have to either have multiple skins for it. So a case in point with her is I might have a separate version. So this is her bald version. I could have one where I've just textured her so it looks like she shaved her head, which means that the top of it would be more pale because of lack of sunlight hitting it, and a little more speckly from where you see like when you shave shave your face, shave your head, and you have these little a day later, a little bit of a not a shadow yet, but you could see where the hair was cut, right? And I might have a version that, oh, she's gonna have this big long hair, or a lot of this, where I will darken underneath it based off of where the line would be, and just kind of have that kind of scattered about on her scalp. So it basically, the quick and easy answer is either you'd have multiple versions, or whatever is going to give you the best result. So a lot of times I will just paint and kind of darken it, and even maybe paint a few hairs on the head, like baby hair, that kind of comes off. If I know it's like just really low, really like just along the edges, and a little bit just like a flat layer of texture of hair on it. Let's see. Here's an example. So, can you guys see this?
Yep.
So when I painted her,
Yes.
I kind of painted in Mudbox this hair that's like really short on her. It's part of the model. If I really wanted to, I could go in and sculpt it so that where the hair is, I could add a little bit of volume to her hair just by lifting up the scalp, by sculpting directly onto the character itself, to kind of lift the hair up so that it's not quite so flush. If I were to bring that hair in, never mind the glowing eyes. That's a refresh thing in Mudbox that happens. But if I were gonna, because remember you can render out inside a Mudbox, right? It's not as cool as when you render out in Substance Painter, but you can do some pretty sweet things with it. So you could actually, and you guys can turn this in, and I think that'd be really awesome if you're working in Mudboxes. You can render out a turntable, right? A turntable animation, which is where you'd go in, say like 240 frames at 24 frames a second. And then maybe HD 720. And they'll create a QuickTime movie. And I'll just stick this on the desktop right now. And it actually renders pretty fast because it's a hardware render, unless you turn on anti-aliasing and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually going, it's at 40% right now. Almost. And I can also render out stills. Saving frames. Definitely faster. So here it is here, and then you'd hit play. See? So you can do that. If I wanted to bring the hair into here, Mudbox is a little weird on how it sometimes shows it, but I've done it before. So you can actually, you'd have your file open, and you go to import that hair. I think this is it right here, one would hope. Now, here's the fun part. We go to the object list. Let's grab, I know all these planes have to be the hair. Oops, not the eye. And then I go to my select and move tools, choose translate, and we can see that her hair is has shrunk. It's okay. So I'd have to scale that up a lot. And this isn't the completed one that I had before, so this was just the one I did earlier. Oops, hello. And then I would just, I would actually just, once it's completed, I would bring the whole thing in. And we could see that the hair is working, but the transparency isn't turned on. So if I go to this material, actually go to the paint layer, import a layer, and this is going to be that texture that we just brought in, or the one that we made in Photoshop for an alpha. If I place it into here, because it's not, doesn't seem like it's showing up the way it should. So let me just see where, go back into Photoshop, File, Save As, grab where it's pointing to. Assuming it lets me, stop that. File, Save As, copy, paste, open. Yes, we want it in the opacity. It's still, that's weird, it's in there. Oh, I think I know what part of that is. Actually, I need to import something else. Import a new layer. Layer spec into the specular. That's better, because part of that was the shine. Interesting. Let's go into here. There's something I can do. Let's adjust the color of the transparency itself. So it's kind of where you can actually adjust excuse me. You can actually adjust each of the layers in a very Photoshop kind of way. And this one's sort of like a collage of the both, because I worked more on the other one. The only other thing that might also be weird is that this particular one, we might need to choose a different material on it. So the weird thing about Mudbox is, besides actually having the textures in there, you actually also designate the material that you're using, and each one, do you see that, has a different effect depending on which one you're using. Stop that. So
Interesting.
yeah, each one, like all these are different material properties. that it actually has. That's why you're noticing, wow, it's changing drastically from one to the other. And some of them, where is it? Oh, interesting. Let's try you. Interesting. So you can actually go in and make adjustments to different things. Ah, there. That's unique. That's very unique. Yeah, it's just having a few issues in it. Because there's glossiness, there's the diffuse, and it's interesting because yes, you can pull in these textures either through here or just directly in.
Would glossiness kind of translate to metallic, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, it's similar. You can almost think of it like if I turn it down to like a here, let's make it a little bit less pronounced. And actually, let me turn on, this ought to be interesting, ambient occlusion. Let's see something. Smooth shade. Oh, show both sides. So now we can get some thickness off of it. There we go. So the transparency is working. I think it's just that it's acting mighty. That's better. Turn the specular down. And you can actually vary up. Do you see that? Like each of these. It does have a little bit of an issue with the transparencies, obviously. Let's see. That's better. It's actually much better. So it's definitely getting there. So I'm using the default, but I've turned down a lot. Let's show. There we go. So if I actually had the hair in, you could actually get a pretty decent render off of it. This is the anisotropic. Receive shadows, so you can have it so it doesn't receive shadows or it does. Blur shadow edges. There's the shadow color. We can lighten that up. So try bringing it in there. That's much better. Just for the quick and dirty one that I brought in. But yeah, this is where you'd want to make sure that it's not penetrating. If it's penetrating and they're overlapping back here, that's not a big deal because you expect it, but you don't want it to happen in the front. Cool thing is I should be able to go in we go. Yeah. But does that make sense? So quick and dirty, impromptu, but just the steps of it, of running through and getting the materials in there. If I'd spent more time on it, of just like laying it out, this one was starting to get there, and I would just literally grab all these together once they're completed as one piece and then import it in. And then have maybe a couple of wisp of hair kind of going on either side, that kind of thing, or tiny little bangs coming from the front. But does that help out?
So would you do yes, it does, definitely.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to go into depth about this, but would you pretty much do a similar thing with the eyebrows? Because I saw your other tutorial about how to do the eyelashes. But would you just do cards to do the eyebrows, or would you kind of like make it like a barrel type texture?
Once again, it
Or
depends
something
on
else that I'm not trying to paint in the corner here.
no, it depends on the style you're going for. I would just use smaller cards, much
Okay.
smaller
Just kind of
cards.
do it the way you did the hair and little
Yeah,
tiny cards go across it.
yeah, just
Okay.
going back and overlapping on each other. So, um, there was, hold on, so many windows. It's like too
And I guess I
much.
do have one more question.
What you got?
Is there anything, haven't done any exporting yet, so I figured I'd ask if there's, of anything. From exporting from Mudbox to Maya, is there any special tricks that I should be aware of, or is it just pretty much, oh, you export it and you just plug it into the proper maps?
Oh, here you go. These are examples for hair cards while we're talking about it. Do you see this?
All right. Yeah.
So just to get this, they have this skull capped
Looks like
kind
they
of thing
painted on the sideburns.
Mm-hmm. And then they have those cards, just like I showed you, that are layered going back for that.
All right.
The eyebrows, like I said, it totally depends on the look you're going for. And you'll see that people.
So you could just probably paint those on as well sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But see,
that's a lot of cards.
That's a lot of cards. But you see what I mean, where they did the same thing, and you have like the hairs coming here, and that makes it look much, much better. And then you could just have a single card or two, like doing stuff like this, or little, parts here. Now
to do a little bit more stylized elements.
Beard or eyebrows, you see that?
I do not at the moment. Yes, now I do.
Now, as far as going from Mudbox to Maya, it's actually fairly easy. And there's a few different ways you can do it. So, number one, you can literally just go in here and just say export each channel out, or you can export the channel out, excuse me, as a PSD, which breaks up all the channels into groups in a Photoshop file that you could then tweak out or adjust.
Okay. So if you have multiple painted on layers,
when I
because
do,
I'm doing it in parts, would you somehow flatten that into a single one?
You can export group merged, export channel merged,
okay.
Like the diffuse channel, or you may have a group of textures that are connected to each other. So it just really it depends on whether or not you plan on tweaking it out in Photoshop or not. Usually I flatten every like diffuse is flattened, specular is flattened, etc. Now, another way of doing it, though it can be a little bit problematic, especially if you have multiple versions of Maya.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just save this. Let's cross our fingers and see if this works. File, send to Maya. And you could send the selected scene directly into it. Now, this works sometimes, and you can go into the preferences, flatten paint layers in each channel before sending, which is a good idea. Flatten sculpt layers, all that stuff. So usually the default is good. May crash, but let me just try it out, and I've saved everything, I believe. So send to Maya, and it usually sends it to the most recent version of Maya that you have, or the last version you installed. So if you have multiples, it can be a little weird, but let's just send as a new scene. Oh. So what I want to do in my object list, excluding the hair right now, because I'll add another layer of weirdness, is I'm just going to go the girl head and her two eyes. And if I had the hair like as a whole piece, it's already in Maya, so I don't have to go back and forth. But if I wanted to send her out right now as is, now I would go send selected as a new scene in Maya. And it's asking me right now, it's basically saying, hey, this mesh could be at a higher resolution. Are you sure you want to do that? Do you want to send the low res version? And I'll just say send mesh at current level. Now, this is problematic if you have obviously if you have an 8 million polygon model. So you might want to step it down a little, and then just export out a normal map or generate a normal map. And then you can boost it back up to looking like it's 8 million polygons, but she's not that dense. So I'm just going to say, yeah, send this over. And now it's asking me all this fun stuff of verifying all the things to send out, right? The diffuse, the specular, incandescence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And do I want to change the naming groups or whatever? And it's also saying, where do you want to send it to? So this is saying, where are the paint layers saved? And this is where, if I was going into a Maya project, I would probably want to point this to the source images folder of the project. And just go to that one. I'm just going to set it up here for right now, just for that. But yeah, so that should be good. So I'm just going to say OK. And it's going to basically generate all those. I'm just thinking. Hopefully it won't be too confused because I have two versions of Maya. It says it's connected, but it's busy. So girl head test. We'll just send that over. Yes. So it says it's exporting, connected to Maya. It's doing what it's doing. And my guess is it should be connecting it to Maya 2018 because that's the most recent version that I actually set up. So it says it's still exporting. Let's just go here and see. Because I don't think it's trying to send it to the other ones. Oh, yes, maybe. Would it? Could it? What do you? I don't know if that's when it's sent over, or is that looks like it is. Oh, connected to my box. Yep, it did it here. So there she is. The cool thing is, you see this little update button down here? Whenever I can bounce back and forth between the programs and make a change and then go and say update, and it will update across both.
Oh, nice.
So this does take a fair amount of resources, but yeah. So you see it works out pretty well. So she came
Okay.
over, she has her textures. She's not really set up right now for interesting. She's not really set up for not mental ray. Well, actually, it would be mental ray because it dropped it into Maya 2016. So then I could actually just go in, add some translucence to her. And of course, it's just the default lights in here. But you can see. But the cool thing is I could take this, then save a new version of it out, and just pull it into the newer version of whatchamacallit, of Maya. Otherwise, I would actually go into here, and instead of trying to just send it out, I would just say export selection. And when I do that, it would export that out, and it would also generate a folder with all of her textures as well, so that when I'd open it up in Maya, let's see, where did we send you? Oh, there she is. Oh, silly. File import, because it's an FBX. Assuming that was it. Yeah, never mind me, the Benadryl is kicking in. It all makes sense, really, it does. File, export selection, Egypt, that's why. Doi. Egypt girl head demo. And there she is, see?
Cool.
And then I would just have to make any changes to the materials that I would need to, like if depending on the renderer I'm using. Like if I'm using Arnold, you could try it out and see what it looks like, but more often than not, you're just going to have to change this over into an Arnold material. And for these different ones, you know. So it has all of the files that you see it brought in. So they're all connected into there. I would just have to potentially go in and swap it out a little bit so that if I were an Arnold, let's just do a sky dome. Bring in a file. Of course, now it's like going, hey, I don't know which one to go into. Man. Oh, that's right, I changed the name of that. Let's just go to here. Let's just grab a nice little image that we can use. Have you guys been looking at the free HDR images at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are actually pretty cool. So not what I wanted. Let's see. Backgrounds. There we are. That's scary. That is going to haunt me in my dreams.
Oh my gosh.
That's not creepy at all, is it? That's funny.
By the way, Ty, here's my project.
It's
Gonna
like,
haunt your nightmares.
it's like just a wee bit scary. Scary, Mary. That's funny.
Hmm.
Arnold does this thing sometimes. I don't know if you've noticed, depending on the version, you have to sometimes start it like the renderer, close it, and then reopen it for it to actually refresh the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
Okay, so obviously I'm not getting all the cool bells and whistles that I would with an Arnold shader, but it's not, as they say, it ain't awful. So just go into the diffuse to boost that up. There we go. See? So that's actually working pretty well. Like I said, obviously, it's not necessarily giving us like all the cool bells and whistles that we could be getting, and there's no Arnold settings in this material. So if sorry about that. So either you would actually you could use this, or you could take a few extra minutes and then just convert this, make an Arnold material and plug all these textures into the Arnold material. But this would be acceptable because it's not bad. It's like it actually, it's actually looking pretty good. And look at that. Unlike Arnold 2017, I don't have to make an AI sky. It automatically just drops that in. Isn't that cool? So all I have to do is just put in the sky dome, and it automatically is illuminating our little friend here, which is nice. So yeah. But that's pretty much it. We've got the bumping. It actually looks pretty decent. For what it is. The only other thing, like I said, would just be creating that that material if I want to get all the bells and whistles from Arnold. But that's, you see how easy it is to bring it into here.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Charity, Sarah, you guys good?
Yeah.
So do what you can, and then whatever, like if you've made any updates, post them up in the discussion also, because that'd be fun to see, and I can look at those and go, ooh, you made changes.
All right. Do we have till Sunday to do that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Same as it ever was. Excuse me. The class basically ends Sunday night, so
All right.
so you guys have till Sunday night to do, to turn in your stuff and get the stuff done. I believe, yeah, because that's usually the way it always is, unless they've switched things up and on me at the last minute. But but yeah, so you guys can basically go in and yeah, everything is due Sunday night. And if you have any other questions, I'm gonna be bouncing around a lot this weekend if I'm not like knocked out on NyQuil, but hit me up. And I'm glad you guys are hardcore, like of doing most of the live sessions. So hopefully they helped out a lot.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, and I have to post it up. Everybody make sure, because I'm getting emails, all the teachers are, of the evaluations, just of doing that, which is separate. You guys get an email now. I think it used to be through the LMS. Now you get an email to go to it. So, but yeah, so that is it. You guys are cool. I'm recording this, so as soon as we end it, I will. I have to convert the file, and then I will upload it into the live session section, so you guys can look at it this weekend.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. You guys good?
Yep.
I got nothing else.
Sweet. Okay, you guys. Well, have a good weekend. Let me know if you have any problems, and I will talk to you later.
Bye.
All right.
Hope you feel better.
Oh, thanks, dear. Take care, guys.
Bye.